I've made multiple videos where I've referenced how I feel about the Golden State Warriors, because in some videos I've slightly talked about them for a short period of time, but I never really went in depth. So today we're going to be looking at the Golden State Warriors, and I'm going to be telling you why I don't trust them. So about a month ago I made a video called Way Too Early NBA Predictions, and one of my predictions was just I didn't think the Warriors were going to be good this year. Now in that video, the main reason why I had said this originally was just because they traded Jordan Poole. I feel like trading Jordan Poole made absolutely no sense whatsoever. Like, I get it, he was young, he would make some like rookie type mistakes even though he's like in his mid-20s almost, because trading Jordan Poole basically said that the Warriors do not have a future. The Warriors were planning for a future with guys like Weissman and Poole and I think Kuminga at the time. However, the only player left is Kuminga, and even Kuminga, he hasn't developed the way we thought he would. Granted, he's not bad, he's just not where we thought he would be just yet. So I say that to say that the Warriors are in a win now situation, which I feel like we've known for the past couple years, but I'm just reiterating it because now if they lose, well, there's no plan, it's just nothing but failure if they lose. Now, something I did not talk about in that video was Steve Kerr, and I think this is something that has been long overdue. And as much as Warriors fans are probably going to show up to my house with a bunch of picket signs, I think Steve Kerr has gotten worse as a coach over the past couple years. And my justification was always, oh, he's going through a small rebuilding phase like they did after losing the finals in 2019. But I think what actually put me over the edge was this Team USA loss. If you guys did not know, the FIBA team just got done playing in the Philippines, I believe, and there's no easy way to say this, but they didn't medal, and honestly, they were a joke of a team. Now trust me, I'm going to make a separate video about this roster and how Team USA was kind of a joke this year. Now, despite this roster not being the best, you still had some of the most solid young players in our game today. And not to mention, they were led by legendary NBA coach Steve Kerr. But during the tournament, I'm not gonna lie, not only was I disappointed in the team itself, but Steve Kerr as a coach disappointed me. Now, before I get into Team USA, I need to explain Steve Kerr's coach as a career, at least for the Warriors. Mark Jackson is the reason why that Warriors team basically got set up. If it was not for Mark Jackson, this team would not be in the position they were in, and when Steve Kerr came in to fill that role, he basically had a pre-built roster. Now, the team with Mark Jackson was making the playoffs, but the following year, as soon as they got Steve Kerr, they were NBA champions, and obviously it put Steve Kerr in a really good light. But the issue with Steve Kerr is he's always had talent, hence why it seems like he's a really good coach. And I know it's very disingenuous to judge a coach just because he had a really good roster, but I do think it is interesting when he's put in the Team USA position and now he's the head coach with these guys that are still pretty talented. He didn't do that well. And then after the FIBA tournament was over, I started to think, and I remembered that Warriors fans have been saying for a while that they believe Steve Kerr is a fraud, which kind of got me thinking. I think my first indication was this man is just terrible with lineups. And oh, speaking of lineups, let's talk about what the Warriors are about to do. So about a week ago, I made a video where I was predicting the NBA awards, and the sixth man of the year was one of the awards I talked about. And really, there was only one person I saw fit, and that was Chris Paul, because it made sense to have Chris Paul off the bench. However, after that video went out, and for the past couple months, it's been teased, but it's official, Chris Paul is going to be starting. And I guess my first reaction to that is, what the fuck, Steven? So the Warriors' potential starting lineup is going to be Chris Paul at the 1, Steph Curry at the 2, Klay at the 3, Wiggs at the 4, and Dre at the 5. Now sure, this lineup sounds sexy on 2K. I mean, having a backcourt of Chris Paul and Steph Curry, that has to work, right? Well, I think for starters, we need to talk about the fact that defensively, this team is going to get torched. Now on the offensive side, maybe that's a different story, but defense is something that the Warriors have not been good at over the past couple years, and this is only going to make things worse. Now, I'll be honest with you, the only way I could justify this starting lineup is if Jordan Poole was still on the team, because that way you have a guy coming off the bench that is going to be a great shooter and a great player overall coming out of it. However, that is not the case. They don't have the depth to be running a lineup like this. And as we've seen over the past couple years, you need a great second team that's out there when the starters need to get some rest. And with all due respect, I don't like the way the Warriors second team is looking right now. I think if you had a guy like Chris Paul, you know, out there with some young guys or veterans, whatever they're going to run. I think Chris Paul would be the perfect general to run that offense going into, the second team. But now because of this, when they have the second guys go in and they have some of the starters go out, a lot of their older players are going to play a lot more minutes than they should be. Despite Steph Curry still, in my opinion, being a top 3 player in the NBA, he is getting older. Klay Thompson is getting older. Draymond Green is on his way to a retirement home. With all due respect, they're getting older, not younger. If I were to tweak the lineup, if I was the head coach in this situation, for one, I'm putting Kevon Looney at the 5. I think Kevon Looney is one of the most underrated big men in the league. And I like Draymond as a big man, however, I think he is much better running the 4 than the 5. Mind you, this is a small ball lineup, and I definitely see this team struggling when it comes to the defensive side, which of course you cannot be bad on one half of the ball. Usually the reason why teams are going to run a small ball lineup is because on the offensive side, they have a lot more things they can do. But the issue is that typically that 5th guy, so the center in this case, they would be a shooter. For example, the first team that comes to mind is the, I believe, 2019 Houston Rockets. And the 5 they went with was 6'5" PJ Tucker, who of course is someone that has a lot of grit and tenacity, but most importantly, he's a great shooter for his size. So if the Warriors were to try that same experiment, which they're basically doing with the small ball, and having Draymond try to space the floor, I don't like the way that goes. Now, I'm going to try to be optimistic. Maybe there's a chance that versus certain lineups and certain teams it could work. I'm not sure which teams because I don't think this is going to work, but I'm trying to be optimistic. But if I was trying to basically rewrite the entire lineup, this is what I would do. I would start Steph and Klay at the 1 and 2. I think Steph should always be running the point, and I think Klay Thompson, despite him getting older, is still a pretty solid shooting guard. Klay had his moments where he struggled last year, however, towards the second half of the season, he definitely picked things up, so I expect things to be more or less the same. I think you keep Andrew Wiggins at the 3. I believe he's done great at the 3. He's a great defensive presence, he's not a bad scorer, and honestly, he has the perfect role with the Golden State Warriors. At the 4, who's surprised? I'm going with Draymond Green. I don't really like Draymond Green in a small ball setting, I just don't think that's where he thrives. But I do think at the 4, running that point forward role, helping the offense, and even being great on the defensive side, I think that's perfect for him. And at the 5, like I mentioned earlier, I'm going with Kevon Looney. I think he's a tenacious rebounder. He's someone that I think has fit in this Warriors role. Now, while he's not going to be the best on offense, I don't really care. His role is going to be on defense. Now, you might be saying, oh, but Spex, that is the same starting lineup they went with last year. And my response would be something along the lines of, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Despite what people are going to try to gaslight and tell you, the Warriors starting lineup was not the biggest issue last year. In fact, I don't think they need to tweak this lineup whatsoever. I think their starting lineup is perfectly fine the way it is. Like, you have something that's good, something that has worked in the past. It's like McDonald's McNuggets recipe. Why would you change it? The shit sucks now. Sorry, I'm really hungry right now. I have not ate all day. But all jokes aside, what I really think the Warriors need to focus on was their depth, because as we saw with the Denver Nuggets, who are being a pretty much prime example of something we should have known years ago, you need depth in the NBA to thrive as a team. And oh, what do you know? Trading for a 36-year-old point guard who has championship experience, I mean, making the championship, not winning it. But seriously, you have a guy like Chris Paul who's been around the game, who's one of the greatest point guards of all time to most people. Having him on the bench would not be that crazy. Yeah, because Chris Paul is so used to starting, I don't think he's going to let that happen, and Steve Kerr thinks this magic lineup is going to work. I think realistically, there are only 2 ways this season can go. I think they're going to either start off 10-0 or like 9-1, and everyone's going to be like, oh my god, the Warriors are back, but then they're going to burn out through the season, whether it's due to injuries or just the fact that the starting lineup is looking into retirement home. Or B, I think the Warriors are going to struggle really bad. I do think they'll pick it up and they'll make a push for the play-in, but they're either going to lose before the actual playoffs or they'll lose in the first round. Either way, as the title states, I don't trust this team. I don't trust them to do well, and I think they're falling apart, which I've been saying for quite some time. I will say though, I have the same logic with Steph Curry like I do with guys like LeBron James or Tom Brady when he was playing. If you have Steph Curry on your team, you always have a chance. Now this year, it may not be a big chance, but it is a chance. Now granted, that chance is more than likely similar to McDonald's changing their recipe back to the original McNuggets.